Hi all. Sometimes it's hard to find absolutely brilliant, crushing games, and I have a fantastic selection of free games to show you over the next few days. This is a selection highlighted by an insightful comment by Garry Kasparov in his Great Predecessors Volume 3 course. He basically says there were convincing victories by Boris Spassky, accompanied by striking creative achievements, as recorded in the list of 10 best games in the 6 monthly Chess Informator. So Spassky took first place in 3 consecutive volumes, 7, 8, 9 of Informator, thanks to the spectacularly crushing defeats he inflicted on Petrosian. So this is the game we're going to look at today. There's also Penrose and Larson. So let's have a look at this fantastic game. You may never have seen it before. Just before we do that though, let's have a recap on the actual book edition of Great Predecessors series. There were massive queues at the time. Here's, by the way, Malcolm Payne in the background, the London Chess Centre. Fantastic resource if you want to buy books and equipment. So there was a great book signing, and I actually got my book signed by Garry Kasparov. Really enjoyed that. But nowadays, there's also now an interactive course at Chessball. You can see that bit.ly link, Kingscrusher TV /Kasparov, which is basically bit.ly. So for me, so if you want to check that out. But now onto the game without further ado. So Boris Spassky playing white, e4, c5 from Petrosian, knight f3, d6, d4. So we're entering an open Sicilian. And Najdorf, bishop g5. So 6 bishop g5. How dangerous is this? Knight bd7, bishop c4, queen a5, and that hits the bishop. The bishop is protected with queen d2, which also unpins the knight, of course. So now h6, and here a very, very interesting decision, especially from what we know about neural network games of Leela chess recently. Giving up a bishop is not to be taken lightly. But here, giving up the dark square bishop actually gets the light squares. So gets pressure, in my view, on the light squares. Every time you give up a bishop of a certain colour for a knight, it's as though the other colour can be celebrated sometimes. So let's watch out now. Bishop takes f6. If white had retreated this bishop to h4, perhaps black can actually get a really comfortable position here because of the mechanism. For example, b5 here. This is an example. Black sits quite nicely here. Okay, so bishop takes f6. Knight takes f6. No better is the offering of structural damage. That really, for example, like this, would be very, very nice for white for playing for f5 and using the d5 square. So knight takes f6, white castles queenside e6, and given the mechanisms of b5, b4, the pawn is actually safeguarded with rook he1. You might think that might have been used for h-pawn attack or something later. Is it a time waste? Just to give a flavour of this, if, say, the super aggressive g4, which some of us may be tempted by, the mechanism, the forcing move b5 and b4, black could actually take this pawn off and play knight c5. Black technically is doing really well. Okay, so rook he1, bishop e7. Now f4, as if f5 to try and pierce through this diagonal. So it looks quite dangerous intuitively. Can black do something with this bishop pair, or is it really about this diagonal blasting through the light squares? Let's see, black castles. Is this a very brave decision? Bishop b3. In light of b5, that takes the sting out of that. More options. If f5 here, then maybe black's dark square bishop does potentially start threatening things after knight g4, threatening bishop g5 to pin the queen. So, for example, this wins the queen. And if white has to waste time with king b1, it seems actually bishop g5, e takes, and black, with the resource coming up of knight e3 in this line. It should be okay for black, basically, this kind of thing. And it's a very tactical line, for example, like this, which ends up in equality. So, yeah, white has to be careful about that dark square bishop being overly liberated. And, yeah, just drops the bishop back. Okay, so rook e8 now is played. Knight g4 is pointless here, just queen e2. So rook e8, king v1. The bishop goes to f8. Now g4, very, very violent move. Idea of g5 supported by the queen indirectly. Nudge the knight. Smash through with g6 to undermine this pawn chain. If white can get in g5, g6, that's really undermining black's structure here. Black took this, so Petrosian showing no fear. And it's quite a tactical position. If alternatively b5, g5, let's see the carnage that might result. Knight d5 is a very nice tactical move, for example like this, and white is crashing through on that g file. For example, the ability to create a battery there, smash through, for example like this. This is absolutely crushing. White's going to end up a rook up in that line, for example. So it looks very, very dangerous here after g5. If knight d7, just to illustrate, g6 undermining that pawn chain. This is very, very nasty, as you might expect. And that g file, putting pressure on the g file. Black's if black has to do something like this to drum up counterplay, it's looking a bit diabolical. Yeah, this is just totally lost. If bishop d7, try and play sensibly, but what happens is, yeah, black's tied up in knots here, and white's just going to play queen g6 and arrange checkmates soon after that, and there's pressure on e6 as well. Diabolical position there. So knight takes g4, queen g2 was played. The knight goes back. Rook g1, bishop d7, f5, so trying to pierce through this diagonal. King h8, rook d f1. So this is a very interesting arrangement. It's designed to pick on the f file and the knight on f6, a key defensive piece. We have the move queen d8, so black on the defensive. If e5 here, you might think, is this forcing move worth consideration? Knight d e2 and picking off this pawn, it looks absolutely end of game, really. This looks absolutely terrible for black, this kind of thing. White's getting a huge advantage. So not to be taken lightly, the committal e5. So queen d8, and we have f takes, and now really violent stuff here, celebrating white's trump cards of this position, which is this enormous piece pressure on the f and g files. Very dramatic piece pressure here down these files. So guess how white intensifies that pressure up a gear dramatically in this position. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video and take out these arrows, what would you play in this position to try and smash through the black defensive shield? Okay, a super liberating move, e5. So that pawn is not using the parking space anymore. It can be used by another piece, and it's also opening up other opportunities potentially. We have d takes, and now in this position, guess what is played? Really fantastic idea, tactical idea. 5 seconds. Okay, using that parking space that was newly created, knight e4, and this knight is immune. The knight went to h5. If it took instead, then can you see what white plays? Okay, rook takes f8, taking out that key defender for checkmate there. So this is an absolutely critical position. If e takes, then knight takes f6. That common square is celebrated of f6. And this is devastating for black's king. That's absolutely, the black king's not going to last too long after that. Here, if also queen g6 is strong as well as an alternative, just to show the strength of the position after knight takes. Yeah, this is just absolutely smashing through. So very, very dangerous. We have the desperate looking knight h5, and now queen g6 lunging in, e takes, and can you see the final move of the game? If I give you 5 seconds. Okay, knight g5 threatening mate in 1, and black had to resign here. If hg, queen takes h5 check, queen f7 check, and a rook lift is killing here in this position. So for example, g4, we just snap that off. A rook lift is going to be smashing through, for example, like that. So really, it was a spectacularly crushing game. Maybe it's a game you haven't seen before. So something to think about in the Najdorf, this 6 bishop g5. Maybe these old weapons are forgotten about, and maybe they're more effective nowadays if you want to try it out. 6 bishop g5 against the Najdorf, with the view of giving up that dark square bishop to get persistent light square play, centralizing the rook, playing for f4, f5. It's funny how the rooks then went from, you know, d1 and e1 to f1 and g1, and the knights ended up on d4 and e4 at one point after that e5 break. So some interesting aesthetic movements going on as well in this game. Really fantastic. So if you enjoyed this game, and you might want to pick up more game references and culture and background about Boris Spassky, one of Kasparov's great predecessors, check out that bit.ly link, Kingscrusher TV /Kasparov, and you'll find an amazing interactive course which has a whole load of insights, not just on Boris Spassky, but also Tigran Petrosian as well in that volume. Okay, thanks very much.